Because what I see oftentimes is like, yeah, we read the Marty Cagan book, we tried to implement some of it for a week, it didn't work, so Marty must be wrong. And this is a bit of a weird perception after people spend years of their life to work on these frameworks and to put them into books in a way that most people can benefit from it. So I think it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. Yeah, there is a lot of material. Is there a lot of not so helpful material? Yeah, so pick your thought leader wisely. But are not enough companies investing enough time and energy to try some of these things before they then either ditch it or enrich it? That's another yes. So I think that's a bit of a dilemma that we're currently in.
Hey there, and welcome back. After a well-deserved summer break, I've been out for almost a month and tried my best to really disconnect. The good news for me is that I succeeded with that, so no posts, no emails, no talks, no episodes, no nothing. The bad news is that if you're a follower of the podcast or my free newsletter, the past 4 weeks have been extremely quiet. But we're back, and back with one of my favorite product people out there, Petra Wille. Petra is the author of one of the best books for product leaders called Strong Product People. She's the founder of one of the best product conferences in the world called Product at Heart, and one of the few product coaches featured in Marty Cagan's new book, Transformed. Petra is one of my biggest references in product, and she's such a great human being. We covered so much in this conversation. Every product leader and manager should listen to this. In the end, we even have a little surprise for you. We did some role-play coaching conversation, so you can actually hear Petra in action and what great coaching is all about. So without further ado, I bring you Petra Wille. Petra, we are live. It's so good to see you.
It's so great to be here. I was looking forward to it all day.
Oh, me too. Petra, I'm such a big fan. You are the author of Strong Product People, one of the best books for heads of products and CPOs, well, product leaders in general. You're also the author of the new book. When was it launched? The Strong Product Communities? Was it like
last year in October? Last year in October.
Strong Product Communities, Petra's new book, The Essential Guide to Product Communities of Practice. You're also the founder of Product at Heart, one of the best product conferences out there. And you are one of the few coaches, product coaches recommended by Marty Cagan in the new book, Transformed. You are one of the product coaches that has been mostly influential in the community. You've done so much for the community, and you've been helping people becoming better coaches as well, so coach the coaches. So I have to ask, Petra, what has inspired you to go into this product coach track, and how's that journey been for you?
As always, my clients have been the inspiration. So they pointed me in the right direction, actually. I started my journey into being a freelance. I think I started off as a product discovery coach, one could say. So I really worked with a product trio to help them wrap their heads around product discovery 11 years ago. And I did fractional head of product work as well after that. And at some point for all of my clients, we came to that end of the current engagement, but people wanted me to stick around to some extent because they really liked the coaching conversations that we had, the one-on-one conversations, which back at the time I didn't even call coaching conversations. It was just, I was the line manager for a certain amount of time. Often it was parental leave things, where in Germany a head of products are sometimes out of the picture for a year or something like that. So I took on fractional roles there. Interims more roles, and then we had all these coaching conversations and personal development conversations, and people loved it. So they wanted me to stick around for that part of the work that we did. The head of product came back, they run with the daily work of the product organization, and they brought me back on occasion for these coaching conversations with some of their staff. So that's they pushed me in that direction to some extent, and I really enjoyed the work and the product coaching. And at some point I thought, like, it doesn't scale if I help one product manager at a time with their personal development. So maybe I can help their product leads to up their people development game a bit more. So that was more of a deliberate choice. to go into product leadership coaching. And I basically just taught them what I was using myself the first few years. Then it became more of a framework thing. And hey, I see some patterns, so maybe I can write a blog post about it. So content grew on my blog, and then some things manifested as tools and frameworks to some extent. And at some point it peaked into Strong Product People as a book and as a, It's a rather thick book. It's a decent book. It's all the advice for product leaders around this topic of people development. So it's really a people development book, I'd say.
It's such a great book. And you've been clearly picking up all these patterns by talking and coaching so many different product leaders. And I'm so interested in digging into some of these patterns because they are, in a way, a reflection of what people struggle with the most as well, generically speaking. So let's just start there. What are some of the biggest struggles that you see in product leaders these days? So people managing product teams and leading them.
So time management is a struggle for all product leadership folks out there. Sometimes to an extent that even if they embark on a coaching journey, it's hard for them to fully commit to it. So there I can often see that they don't have the time to prepare well for coaching sessions or to follow up on any of the things that we discussed. So I can see time management being really critical thing for everybody. All of them, or most of them, understood what their role should be and that they need to take care of the product organization and the people, that they need to be there to provide, I usually call it directional clarity. So that's the strategic part of the role. Think about where is this product going? What are we doing? Where's innovation coming from? And all of them understand to some extent, and this year we're talking a lot about that, right, is product operations, product operating model processes. So kind of, I call it creating this shipyard around the teams that are then responsible for building the boats and the ships and the vessels. So most of my coaches are aware of that, let alone when to find the time in their busy calendars to do all of that, where to find the time to reflect and to pause and to listen and to do all the actual thinking. So that is oftentimes something that we do in the coaching sessions, that we need to reframe this pausing and reflecting and thinking as the actual work to some extent as well. So that's a bit of a mental shift that I usually have to work on with many product leads. And then oftentimes it's practical tactics around time management. And then everybody comes with different emphasis to the product leadership role. Some lack product experience because they've never been a product manager themselves. So they come from wherever, from the business side, from marketing, from a random leadership role within the organization. And then we do a lot of this product basics. So this is how you would actually create the product. That's what discovery is all about. So I have a lot of these basic conversations with some of the folks, and then others are having this massively strong product background, but struggle, for example, with stakeholder management, with senior executives, with board meetings, with these kind of things. So that really depends on the person and their background. Yeah, but time management and understanding the role is a biggie for everybody, I'd say.
Yeah, that's very interesting with the different maturities, right? So more junior product leaders, they perhaps are more still in building the product rather than building the team and building the organization. So they're still in that mantra, right? And then more sort of senior folks that understand product, been there, done that. Maybe their struggles now, it's like, okay, how do I manage up? And managing up now means boards, executives, and so on. So that's a completely different ballgame for them, being aware of the financial side of things, linking, product to finance and so on. But you touched on an interesting point. So time management. So if some of these leaders, they're not coaching their people and they're not thinking and reflecting and strategizing, so what are they typically doing then?
So some are firefighting all day long. It's basically that's the place where they find themselves into. And we often start with then reflecting on how much of the firefighting they actually do, how much of that is actually necessary. Some of them tell me that they never have the time to think things through and don't do any people development. And if we look at their calendar, I obviously see they do some. So some people say, like, I don't do people development at all, but they do a weekly one-on-one with everybody on their team. So that's more than a lot of other product leaders are doing, right? So it's often perception and reality checks that we need to bring across at first. And then, it's so much about, so boring, but time boxing and finding rhythms and rituals that actually work for every product leadership person. So I always encourage them to say, like, hey, you need to look at your strategy once a year. So why are you not blocking time for that? And you know that you need to discuss goals once a quarter. So why is there no time blocked for you? And you can't block that the next 3 years, basically. And then there is no somebody has overbooked my blockers, right? The question is, how many time do you need to block, and how many time do you still need freely floating around in your calendar for people to interact with you a lot? But I think there is no time for reflecting and pausing and thinking things through if you don't plan it in your calendar. And some end up doing this while they take a walk, or they know that they need a quick nap before they then go into reflection mode once a week maybe, or something like that. Things like that are easier now that a lot of us have at least some work from home days. So I see a lot of product leaders really benefiting from that, because they are more kind of on top of their schedule to some extent. They can eat whenever they think food would be a great addition to their day. It's easier for them to maintain their energy levels. But time management and blocking time in your calendar and finding rhythm for some of the things that you know you need to be doing every week, month, quarter, year. That is actually something that we try to do in a really hands-on session in most of the coaching sessions that I'm having at some point of the engagement.
Nice. So, okay, let's say that you are a product leader and you understand that you need to time box for coaching. You need to develop your people and you need to make time for it. I think a challenge that comes up for a lot of these folks is that they may make the time, but then they don't even know where to start. So let's dig into product coaching a little bit. As a product leader, how do you develop your people? What are some of the things, the steps that you usually recommend them to do to just get started in developing their people?
Yeah, there are a few starting points. So one, if possible, reflect on what a competent product person means in your organization and context. So how does good look like? What is your personal definition? So if a person is working on your team, what are you holding them accountable for? What do you think is the skills that they need, the know-how that they need to bring to the table, the activities that they need to perform, all these kind of things? Because I think without a compass, without this definition of good, it is super hard for you to, first of all, onboard your people, talk about expectations toward the folks that are working in your organization. And if you have low ambition, I see so many product organizations being rather mediocre just because the product leader has no expectation towards the team that they're currently running. So have high ambitions for your team, have high expectations for the product folks. For example, and that is maybe the next step, you need to put it in some sort of let's call it assessment for the time being. I don't like to use it as a HR-like assessment that decides upon promotions and stuff like that. But I think you need something, a framework where you can put people in front of and then discuss how they're currently doing and if they live up to the expectations or if they don't. A framework that helps you to get 360-degree feedback, maybe from their team and stuff like that. And at some point, I developed such a framework. I call it the product management wheel. And it's way easier to have these conversations if you have something like this product management wheel where you say, hey, look, this is what I'm expecting from a competent product person. A lot of my clients, when they see it the first time, they say, like, oh, Petra, this is way too much expectations toward a product manager role. It's impossible. So we have stretched all of these responsibilities across 5 or 6 roles in our organization. And then that's another conversation to have, why that causes a lot of friction in the system and maybe why there's not so much innovation going on in this organization and why maybe the pace of discovering and shipping stuff is not where the actual company would like it to be, but it's another conversation, right? But I think it is a good thing to have like, okay, in an ideal world, this is what I expect from a competent product manager in this organization, and then let's help the people to get there. And it's super hard for people to get better if you don't tell them where they should focus their time and energy towards, right? So I think the first thing that you could be doing if you have the time, because it's a bit of an upfront time investment if you start in product leadership, or even if you're doing it for years but never have done this, define your good, then do this. Think about, the core things that people should bring to the table and the activities that they should perform. And there's my framework out there and a lot of frameworks from other people. Ravi Mehta has a great framework. Marty Cagan obviously has a framework, but the product daisy is out there. There's so many frameworks that you could use for that. So go find one that works for you or is close to your ideal and then tweak it a bit. And then make sure you use it within your organization. So that's usually one starting point. And product leaders often think it's weird if they running the product organization for 2 years and now coming with a framework like that. But I always saw employees really embracing this clarity, this role clarity that might bring to their work world. So I encourage all the product leaders to do so. If you don't have it, still create it and then start conversations around it. Because if people have this idea of, maybe it's the user interviewing skills where I'm lacking, or actually I never reflected on how I do prioritization. So maybe it's a nice moment to do this now, and maybe it helps me progress in my career or something like that. So I think it helps people to have this high level headline. If you don't have the time to do that right now, you still can start coaching. And then you start more passion driven, one could say. So you could ask your product people where they're currently struggling, where they might need some help developing. And some will say like I know I always have this massive discussion with this one stakeholder group over here. So help me solve that. And then you can start with this particular problem. So you could either start case by case, or you actually start with this definition of good. I think both works. But you need to start somewhere. So find this first topic you can help them with.
Very good. So define what great looks like for your organization. And I think that's the second part of the sentence is incredibly important. Like, don't copy everything that you read in the books. You just take the lessons learned, take the good principles and what's out there.
Exactly.
Pick some of these frameworks that are already out there, like yours, the PM Wheel and others. Take that, contextualize to your context to the best of your ability, and then basically start running those sort of assessments. But I like that you also mentioned this caveat of it's not like an HR like assessment. It's basically just to have a reference to, okay, how are you doing towards this, and what are your struggles, and how can I help you develop where and unblock.
And it's particularly helpful because you want to make all this conversation less personal. So if you have a framework for that and you use it for every person on your team, even the harder feedback conversations are not as personal as if it would be if you would not have such a framework. So that's, I think, one of the big pluses of such a framework.
And then what's next? Do you after some of those sessions, do you set goals for kind of learning goals or development goals in a way, or how do you approach that journey, that learning journey and development journey? Is there any ways that you prefer?
Yeah, so usually if you use a tool like the PM Wheel, you find 1 or 2 or 3 things where the employee themselves or the product person themselves kind of realizes, that's actually something nice that I could invest a bit more time into. I would be curious to learn more about that. So let me do this. So oftentimes it's not so much that you need to set goals for them. It's more often that they already embracing one of the topics and want to go run with it. Then I just encourage the product leads to make sure that it's kind of in the interest of the organization at the current time, because sometimes employees pick stuff where you think like, not sure if this is valuable for us as an organization to learn right now. Where in other cases you think like, to learn this would be highly beneficial for us for the next 6 to 9 months or 12 months or something like that, right? So give it a bit of a company budget reality check. So does it make sense for the company to invest in that skill and that capability or that piece of know-how that the employee wants to gain? And then I really encourage them to fill out something that I call the future self. So why do they think the topic that they pick is a great topic for them to invest time and money in? So what are they currently struggling with? Are there any challenges that one could observe? So if it's user interviewing or prioritization. So maybe you in constant discussions with your stakeholders, why the things in your backlog are in this particular order. They always think like the prioritization of the product person is random. So there could be things that you could observe. So put that in your future self. That's your as-is description. And then think about, how could we tell in 3 months from now or 4 months from now that my prioritization skills have improved? So how could others tell? How would they see, oh yeah, Petra really learned a thing or two about prioritization. So that is your to-be description. And then I encourage them to find things they could tick off a list, so activities that they could do to get closer to this ideal self, to this to-be self. And that could be things like, hey, first of all, reflect on how you're currently doing prioritization. Then see if it already solves your problem. If you explain this way of prioritizing to your stakeholders, maybe that solves the entire problem. Maybe not, then you maybe want to invest a bit more time to learn about how other people listen to Gabrielle Buffram, for example. She talks about prioritization a lot, right? So find people that talk about it a lot, reflect on, or Itamar, another case that talks about prioritization in his book. So go read the material of those folks and see again what lands, what sticks, what resonates, and then make it yours. So it's similar to what I would advise product leaders to do. So use the same pattern. And then again, go talk to your stakeholders about your new way of approaching prioritization, if that helps and if that sticks. So that could be example activities in coaching. And that makes this nice future self as is to be activities, and then you need a time frame for it. So I always encourage people to say like 3 to 4 months is usually a nice time frame for improving a skill or learning something new, because you need to read about it, you need to apply it and try to see if it helps you, you need to reflect, all these kind of things, right? So you need a bit of time for it. If the time frame is too long, usually it kills momentum. So keep it at 3 to 4 months, I'd say, and then come back and ask you, as a product leader, ask your folks if they need a follow-up and if they need a nudge every once in a while, because every direct report is different. Some just need the occasional water cooler nod and say like, hey, how is the prioritization thing going? And they are back on track again. And others need maybe a weekly reminder or even need you to think things through. So you need to really kind of brainstorm with them on solutions or something like that. So ask how much they need your support, offer you support, ask them how much you need to follow up and how many nudges they need to actually be successful in their personal development.
I really like that nuance, because sometimes more senior PMs, they get a bit neglected because the product leaders expect them to know everything. It's she knows what she's talking about. And then they really want that conversation. They really want to be challenged, and they really want that person to ask great questions to help them think. But just because they are senior, they get a bit neglected. So I really like that nuance of adjusting kind of how you approach it based on seniority, but still do something. Don't just neglect and kind of walk away.
Yeah, I like that you're pointing this out, because I even have a chapter in the book about it, so how to keep the seniors engaged, because that's one of the hardest things as a product leader. And they usually have a really stressful role, but to some extent it's rather boring because they've done it a million times, more or less. So they built this product, they know the team, they know what to do, they do it again, more or less. But they're not doing it again, because we're looking for innovation in product management always. We need to innovate on behalf of our users, right? That's what we do. So they need to stay curious. They need to wrap their head around new technology. They need to need to keep encouraging with the team and to see what engineers can bring to the table and what technology is out there and all these kind of things, right? So how do you keep these seniors engaged and curious and not making their work too repetitive or something like that. So I think for them, people development is a bit of a different game, but it's an important one because you need those folks.
Absolutely. And I guess, when you have a senior PM, your job is also to help them go from, if they want to, from a senior PM, individual contributor to a PM, to a product leader. And then that's a whole new wheel, isn't it? Or at least part of it.
Yeah, it is.
And do you usually recommend also having some framework for product leaders as well? Or do you think it's more sort of fundamental for ICs, individual contributors?
That's such a fun fact that you're asking this question. I'm currently considering if I have a super simplified wheel for product leaders in the book. And over the years, once in a while, I'm coming to this point where I think like maybe I need to create a more detailed wheel-like structure for the product leaders. I had this conversation with various other product coaches recently because there's nothing like that out there. So why is it? I think it's usually not because there is a shortage of material. Maybe it's too complex of a thing because it's in even more it depends role definition. It really depends on your product maturity of your organization, of how you define product leadership at all, of the supporting functions that the organization already has. So a corporate company with a big product ops team or something like that, and a massively mature user research department and amazing design all across the board and in every team. That's an entirely different product leadership game than when you're having none of these supporting functions, right? So whenever I start thinking about, can I create a product leadership wheel, it seems to be a bit of an impossible thing. I'm currently in the process of collecting more and more material around that. Maybe at some point I will release something, but I think it can just be a framework that every other company needs to break out and free from anyways, because it will be too limited maybe. So let's see if I can do that. But yeah, the product leadership role is really so different depending on the context and the company and the industry you're operating in.
I think that's such a great point. And I think Marty Cagan at some point, he mentioned that he is aware, I think that's how he put it, I'm aware that this is needed, but he hasn't done it. So I guess probably he has the same reflections as you. Like, okay, where do I start? But I still think that a generic one would probably be helpful. Because a lot of product leaders, they struggle to even understand the role, and some of these people, they're just put in the role because CPO, for example, is a trendy role, and we need a CPO, and then just, okay, that person, and it's probably good for the job, and then there's no sort of understanding of what their role actually is, and the skills that we have. And then at the same time, there's a lot of material out there, as you said, but there's also a lot of these descriptions that in some contexts seem very utopic, right? This is the whole rant that John Cutler is having now of the Instagramification of our industry. I love that because I'm like you. I like to have what great looks like. I believe that is impossible to improve if we don't have what great looks like kind of agreement, sort of something to strive for. But it's very important to contextualize the maturity and to see the journey as steps rather than kind of a shot of where you are and sort of this ideal scenario that everybody's painting. And I see so many product leaders and product managers, actually more product managers than product leaders, struggling and sort of getting depressed almost because they read all this material and they think, Jesus, this is so far away from where we are, and like, where do we even start? So what's your advice to navigate that landscape of sort of the Instagramification of our industry? How should people consume these books that we all know about, and how mindful should we be about the journey?
Yeah, there's so much to unpack here. Funnily enough, I published a blog post, I think yesterday or something like that, that is called Read Those Books. Because I observed the same things that you were kind of talking about. I see people telling me that they're using OKRs, and we kind of in the conversation for 5 minutes, and I can already tell that none of the people in the company has ever read some of the great OKR books, right? What they heard, that objectives and key results is a thing now. That's basically it. That was an Instagram tile or a quote somewhere, or maybe the CEO learned it on a golf course or kite surfing lesson with some of his fellow CEOs. That's usually where things come from. And then that's what they do, right? They're running a company on a set of OKRs, and nobody ever has wrapped their head around the OKR methodology as a whole. Then oftentimes a product manager does. So they stumble across Christina Wodke's book or John Durr's book or whatever great OKR book out there. And they read it and they're like, this is so not what we're doing. And then they have this whole burden of pushing for real OKRs from the bottom, so to say, as a roots movement. And this is, I think, what many product people are so frustrated right now. So they read the material, they understand the material, they like the material, but then the implementation of it is so poorly done, and the execution towards it is so poorly done within their organizations. And that is something that I encourage people to change. So product managers, usually not the issue. Product leaders, oftentimes part of the problem, I have to say. So that is why I put the blog post out there. One of my clients just recently told me that they just decided to read one book a year. And then for the entire year, they try to implement it and tweak it and see if that methodology is helpful. And then they tweak it, and then they break the framework, and then they come up with their own version of it, which I like. But I only like people breaking free from the frameworks after they understood how the initial frameworks were supposed to work, right? Because what I see oftentimes is like, we read the Marty Cagan book. We tried to implement some of it for a week. It didn't work, so Marty must be wrong. And this is a bit of a weird perception after people spend years of their life to work on these frameworks and to put them into books in a way that most people can benefit from it. So I think it's a bit of a chicken and the egg problem. Yeah, there is a lot of material. Is there a lot of not so helpful material? Yeah, so pick your thought leader wisely. But are not enough companies investing enough time and energy to try some of these things before they then either ditch it or enrich it? That's another yes. So I think that's a bit of a dilemma that we're currently in.
Yeah, I love that point. And so, yes, you need to read those books. And I love that you said that a lot of people don't. And then you just go into the organization and you see how messy it is. And that could be solved with just a little book read, and it's
which costs $25. That drives me crazy.
And it's so frustrating because, Petra, sometimes I feel exactly like it really resonated what you said, and sometimes you get these people that are locked into this thought of like, but that's too theoretical, or like, but just the books are the theoretical, reality is different. It's like, well, some of these books have been describing the patterns of more than 1,000 organizations of things that have worked and has not worked. Read the patterns, read the anti-patterns, understand the principles of these people that have worked with hundreds of organizations in completely different contexts, and then pick your lessons and contextualize, but read the book. So I think there's this, as you mentioned, the chicken and the egg. I think some people don't read the books, that's a problem. Some people read one book, and that's a problem. Because then they don't even know where to start, and they are unable to pick the dots and to connect the dots, and so on. That's super interesting. And you talk about, I'm jumping into communities of practice now because it's a good segue, because this is part of communities of practice. I would assume it's the bottom, right? It's kind of a book club, for example. You can start there. There's so much more, but can you tell us more about how you start with communities of practice and why these things are important to foster the learning that we are talking about?
So maybe briefly I talk about why I'm so interested in that topic. So as I was mentioning earlier, I always have this ambition to, how can I help more companies and especially more individuals to have fun with the work that they actually do, and impact. So I think both would be cool to have when you're working for a product company these days. So you enjoy going there every day and you're having the impact with the product work that you do. And I see many companies not having product communities of practice at all. So there is no product chapter, or however you call them, product tribes, some call them tribes, whatever word you use. I think it's oftentimes so siloed, this product role. So you're working with your team, you have the occasional lunch with one of your fellow product people, you have your maybe one-on-one with your direct line manager, but that's often it. And I find that sad, depressing, not necessary, right? So you could start with really small human-to-human interactions. So if you just post in your Slack channel in your organization to all the product people, hey, I'm about to read this book. Is anybody else interested to read it with me? And then we can share what we read into it, right? Because even the interpretation of such a body of work is an interesting thing to discuss within an organization. So if it's 5 people, then it's 5 opinions already, and they have 5 different professional backgrounds and 5 different products that they're working in. So that's an amazing starting point for learning something new and for upping the overall product maturity within this organization. So especially if I would be a product leader, that's such a great possibility to free up some time in my calendar, because if you have an active community of practice, they maybe even can take over some of the onboarding efforts that I would usually need to otherwise do. In some organizations, they even do a bit of the role definition and at least are helpful to the product leader to update the role definitions every once in a while, or things like that. Or they see where the friction in the system currently is, and they could point that out and bring that up where process improvements are long overdue, or whatever it actually is. So I think it helps if people gather every once in a while, and if they talk about the processes, the methodologies they use, the current struggle. Sometimes they just need a place to vent. That's perfectly fine as well, because if people are complaining, then we know something is wrong, and then we could ask them a bit more about what would the ideal outcome be. So what is the ask that they would actually have, so that this complaint is no longer a thing and no longer necessary, right? So that's why I'm interested in community of practice. It helps my product leaders to free up some time on the calendars, and it to some extent helps me to bring out the good product management spirit to the world. So I want more companies to have an active community of practice. And you can start really small, just with people talking on a Slack channel, people meeting for, I don't know, informal beers and wine if you're in the same location, or you can have and it's important that you not talk project and product updates in these sessions. We're having other meetings for that. But process improvements, learning, stuff that didn't work, great resources that one found, a great book, a conference. If you send your team to a conference, why not having a session after the conference? Which talks resonated most and why, and who tries to implement which of the things that they learned at the conference? Even if you haven't sent your team to any conference because you have no budget for that, then a lot of conferences have video archives. So you could do a team day where you do watch parties and watch some of the talks from a conference together. So a community, an active community, is a super cheap way to up the product development game across your organization. So that's why I think it's so cool if you have one. Hopefully everybody starts one.
Absolutely. I love these points on really making time, and it's so easy. It's so easy, even if you don't have an actual budget. It's so easy making time to discuss how we work, to discuss, or like you said, have a safe place to vent, and then for the product leader to listen to those complaints and then try to unpack those complaints and understand and bring those complaints back to design a better system. But also a point you mentioned I really liked, using the community of practice to free up time of the product leader in things like onboarding and even upskilling. So a follow-up question there, how do you actually start that community? What have you seen to be the best thing? Is it the product leader to own it and to drive it, or is it you bring an external product coach, or you just give the responsibility to a few product managers? Like what's the best approach you've seen?
Yeah, so communities of practice are active when there is a strong core of active members that are driving the community of practice. And that is more than one person, and ideally not the product lead at all. Ideally, you don't want to attend most of the sessions anyways, because your product people need a place where they can actually even vent about you. So that's
Right.
maybe why you don't want
Good
to.
point.
If they invite you, that's amazing. And in a lot of the companies that I'm working with, they do. And in others, they exclude the leadership layer explicitly from all of their community of practice meeting, because they say it's about the details of, hey, we created personas and you created personas. Are we using jobs to be done that way and we're using it the other way around? So what do we learn from that, right? So sometimes even boring for the product leads, but still necessary conversations to happen. So find people that are interested in starting such a community. You always have them on your organization already. Those are the ones that are regularly sharing content already. Those ones are the ones that are sharing back and say like, hey, I was at that community, conference, should I report back? And those are the ones that run to the product tanks, to the local meetups. So go find these people and then make sure that you're more of the sponsor for the community of practice. And sponsoring comes with time and with a budget aspect. So time is more, encourage them to invest some of their working hours and dedicate them towards the community of practice work. So if it's for the active community members, I think it's like in the beginning, 2 to 4 hours a week to get things going. And for the participants, so the not so active community of practice members, it's maybe an hour every other week or an hour a week or something like that. If you make it an hour a week, then maybe 1 week they're reading a book and the other week you have a gathering or something like that. A bit of rhythm, again, a bit of rituals to some extent. Some do, I don't know, brown bagging sessions on Friday morning, bringing your breakfast, and then just have casual conversations, and a more structured one where everybody finds their new learning headline for the next quarter and they share these learning headlines. So see what actually works. I put some ideas in the book if you're interested in that a bit more, or on my blog. You can find most of the things on my blog for free. So find these active core community members, then equip them with time they are allowed to spend on starting the community, and a bit of budget. And with budget, I mean more book buys, or maybe sponsoring the local product meetup in, pizzas would be. So that's kind of the sponsoring budget that I'm thinking of. So more down the line, you could think about, why not allowing your community of practice to organize the annual team day where everybody is gathering and learning something new, so they could maybe even bring in external speakers or something like that. That would require bigger budgets, but that's not something that I would recommend you to do when you start off as a community of practice. I really like the team to think about, what is the purpose of our community. Learning together, for example, is something different than learning with each other. Because if you're learning with each other, then it's maybe attend a conference together, share what you heard, reading books together. If it's learning from each other, then you maybe want to report what you're currently doing, what methodologies you're using. So talk about the purpose, then find good formats that work for this purpose of your community of practice, and then start small. Even if just 10% of your product people attending. And if you have a 30 people product organization, that might be 3 people that are attending the first community of practice. But that is really how communities usually start. So it's individuals, it's small, it's human to human interaction, and then see where it grows from there. And if you give them this time and a bit of a budget, people get creative and do funny things with it. And then others gravitate towards the already active core of your community.
Absolutely. No, communities of practice is so important for learning and to foster that learning culture. I love it. And of course, if you do have the budget, for example, to go one step further and bringing in a product coach as well, in addition to the community of practice, that's of course a luxury. I would argue product leadership coaches for the product leaders, and then product coaches for product people, but that's of course kind of ultimate goal. But Petra, on that, you've written a really interesting article that I wanted to explore before we go on to a little experiment. So you've written an article called "Why Agile Coaches Can't Be Product Coaches," something like that. And this is a very interesting one, because what I'm seeing now is sort of, it's not new, but it's a rebrand of a lot of different things because it sells more. So you have, if a user researcher, for example, is really skilled at user interviewing, and she might be advertising her services, nobody buys it. As soon as she advertises herself as a product discovery coach, she's booked a full month. And it's and this is interesting because it's the same with agile coaches. Everybody sees the movement that agile is. There's a lot of negativity towards agile recently, and what I see is that some of the agile coaches are now branding themselves as product coaches, especially now after the product operating model being sort of more out there. And you've taken a stand on that, and I would like to explore that. Well, can you unpack why do you believe agile coaches can't be product coaches, and what can these people do to actually become a real product coach?
They can't. They can't. So that's my personal opinion. I am unpacking that in the blog post a bit more, right? So I am having some advice. So where I see that happening a lot is in big corporate organizations, right? They have invested heavily in agile. They maybe have overhired on the agile coaching / Scrum Master side. So they now have a lot of them running around. Now we see an interest in product coaching coming up because of Transformed and the product operating model and all these kind of things, and product coaches being more common as an external part of the company. So now more and more corporates have why are we spending so much money on the external product coaches? We could hire them ourselves. And I totally support that idea because I think it's an amazing idea. And if your organization is big enough, then why not having a few internal product coaches? So yes, please go do so. Can you just put some of your kind of product agile coaches overhead towards your product coaching vacancies? I'd say no. You can, but it doesn't have the same implication as if you would hire real product coaches. The thing is the experience level. And the question is, what do you want the product coaches to do? So if you take the more European definition of coaching, which is asking the right question at the right time, helping the people to reflect where they are, helping them to develop kind of their way to success, and then helping them kind of grow into this future self, then that is maybe something that your agile coaches can do. Then it's rather framework agnostic, then it doesn't have to do much with product advice, so to say. And that is something that they could still provide. So if they're really good and is only asking the right inspirational question at the right time, then yeah, maybe that's a good idea. But most of the agile coaches that I've seen that move into product coaches are not doing that. So they continue to give advice to the product people on something that they have basically no experience at. So they haven't read the books. They don't know who the thought leaders are. They don't know what the frameworks are that all of us are most of the time are using. They're oftentimes really focused on delivery and not so much on discovery, because you tend to talk about the things that you know a lot about. And for a lot of agile coaches, that is more the delivery aspect of product management than it is the discovery aspect of it. So the balance is oftentimes off in their advice that they're giving. And many of them are not even aware of that kind of knowledge gap to some extent. But in the blog post, I really say hey, this is how you could be helpful to a product organization if you are an agile coach and you want to help the product organization. And I think there are some things where they can be helpful, but are they a similar thing than a real product coach who has years of experience in product management, who did it in various teams and various setups and in various organizations, who knows how to build a product, how to work with the team, how to discover, how to do the user research, how to set everything up for success, how to deliver for the business something that is actually making some money. Usually not something that agile coaches have wrapped their head around. So I think they can't close that gap entirely, because I just recently had somebody who went back to become a product manager, so an agile coach who decided he wants to become a product coach, and he realized that therefore he needs to work in product and his goal is currently 2 to 4 years. And I would say, yeah, maybe after that he can be an okay product coach in his organization. But if you don't want to go down that route, then maybe just be helpful for the time being and make sure your company still hires somebody who has a lot of product experience.
I like that. Great. And speaking about great product coaching, we have a little surprise now. It's an experiment. We're gonna do a bit of a role play here, and we haven't talked
Let's
about
see how
this,
that goes.
much. So, so the thing is, for those who are listening, I'm going to pretend that I'm a product manager working for Petra, and Petra is my product leader and my direct manager. And so we're going to have a coaching conversation. So Petra, as my product leader and my manager, will help me doing a hypothetical tough time. I don't even know what I'm going to talk about. So this is
Me neither.
So this is a whole experiment live.
We freestyling it on the spot.
Exactly. So everything I come up with, all the struggles I'm going to come up with, they are not my personal struggles. I'm going to create this hypothetical character. So let's see how it goes. So Petra, we are entering the meeting room. We just sat down and let's get started with the conversation.
Let's do it. I, by the way, will be thinking out loud so that the listener will understand my line of thinking if I would be the product leadership person. Okay, so there is a meta layer to the whole conversation.
Okay, that's great.
Let's see if that works. That. I don't know.
Love that. Okay, so hey, Petra, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. The week is going amazing. What about you?
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Ooh, what's going on? If it's okay, then maybe there's something that you want to talk about. Is there something you want to share?
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you asked. Well, yeah. I mean, I've been having a little some problems with Bob, the designer. We keep clashing on who owns Discovery. You know, Bob. He likes to take decisions, and I've tried to sort of, and kind of tell him that I would like to be more involved with Discovery because that's kind of what I've been reading about and we talked about. But yeah, he's very sort of specific on, but design, we sort of own this. So I'm not sure how to approach this actually. So
meta layer now, as a product leadership person, I would think about, so I would have more context about you, Alfonso, I bet. So I would know if you're more a junior product person or more a seasoned senior product person, because on that, it kind of my modus operandi depends on that information, right? So let's assume you would be more of a junior product person. I would maybe give you advice how to solve the solution. If it's super hardcore and there's a lot of friction and conflict, I might be even hand holding and go take you by my hand and solve the problem with you. So having this conversation with Bob on your behalf, not something that I would recommend doing it often. If you're a bit more on the senior scale, maybe making suggestions what you could do next would be a good way to go about it. Then I could provide feedback. That would be my next layer. So I can provide you with some feedback of what I hear. So how much tension is there in your voice? Can I see something in your body language that you're maybe not yet aware of? So I could say something like, hey, Alfonso, I see you really, it seems to sit heavy on you, right? This whole conversation with Bob. So I then would like to learn more about the situation and how it actually feels. And then ultimately, for more long-term personal development, I would try to challenge your thinking. So what actually you could do to solve the situation on your own without even having me in the picture the next time or something like that. So that would be a quick check-in. So do you need help me give some advice? Do you need me for providing you with feedback? Do you need me to challenge your thinking? Depending on your maturity. What is your maturity level?
Let's say I'm junior. Let's say I'm a junior PM. I don't know a lot of this stuff. I read Marty Cagan and 3 Stories, and I haven't done a lot.
Okay.
Let's say that's my
Then my next meta conversation in my head is, do I think it is more helpful to go down this more personal feeling emotions route with you, because I know you as a person, at least a bit, or is it more that I need to go down the rational frameworks tools kind of a route. So for the time being, I would like to go down the more emotional route here. So I would ask Alfonso, I can see that this whole situation quite stresses you out. So can you tell me a bit more about what happened last week and how did you actually feel? So how was your emotional reactions? What are actual encounters where you went head to head? Or tell me a bit more about your kind of week with Bob.
Yeah, it was not head to head, we have a good relationship, but it's been like I've been reading Teresa Torres and I really want to work like a product trio, but Bob keeps seeing me as sort of just a project manager, and he keeps interviewing users without me and making sort of big decisions without me, and he kind of doesn't create a lot of space for me to be involved in those interviews. So that's basically the context. I don't really know how to approach it. I've told him that I want to be more involved. So let's see what happens next week.
Cool. Now I would think about, what does Alfonso need? Do we think he needs more of a framework to assess the next situation like that as well? Then I talk him through my rationale. Or is it that I really just provide him, and I assume Alfonso is a super clever person, so I would provide them with a bit more context here. So for example, I would say like, hey Alfonso, all these people business, that's such a big part of the job, and oftentimes it's really hard to work with other folks if, for example, there is no role clarity yet. So I know that you're just working together for this assumption, 3 months or something like that. So maybe you want to invest a bit more time to talk to Bob about your roles. So your role as a junior product manager and his role as a designer on the team. Then you could equip them with either the PM wheel or something like that. So your assessment and your definition of good, you could say like, hey Alfonso, do you remember our onboarding conversation when I walked you through this PM wheel? So maybe it makes sense to dig that out and to go through it with Bob and see where he says like, hey, this is actually something that I want to do. Why are you responsible for that? And then be curious why he thinks that way and learn a bit more why he draws the line between the two roles. And then I'm happy to talk about that next week in our one-on-one conversation. So I'm having your back. At some point in time, we can sit down, all three of us, maybe even with the direct line manager of Bob, and see if there's more role clarity needed. So please let me know if you need my help with that, because role clarity and providing role clarity is part of my job. So if you don't succeed to sort things out with Bob, come back and we see what we can do role clarity wise. And another thing that I would share to you is that working together with other humans always requires a certain level of trust. And this trust has to be established. Some people are better in giving you the trust up front. And if you don't do something to ruin it, they just trust you because you know your colleagues, the company has hired you, you jumped through all these burning hoops of the HR department, so you're here for a reason. Where others really mistrust every new person on the team, at least for some amount of time, unless they see, they actually know what they do and what they're talking about. So maybe it's not a role clarity issue, but a trust thing. So my question to you would be, maybe you can reflect on that until next week. Is there something that has maybe, kind of triggered Bob to not trusting you in the role that you have? Maybe you haven't showed them what you're able to do enough. Maybe I can help you to find things how you could show what you're already capable of, because I know I hired you for a reason. So... And then hopefully there happened something in the past that I could point to now. So you hold this amazing presentation in front of the entire company last week. Bob wasn't present that week. So maybe that's something that you want to repeat or something like that, right? So that's how I would coach Alfonso on his issue with Bob, because it's more often a people problem than it is a methodology and framework problem. So trust would be a big topic. Role clarity would be a big topic. And then take it slow week after week, because Alfonso is a junior person. So he only can work that much time on his relationship to Bob.
Oh, this was Petra. So it was like 9 minutes, and there's so many things to unpack here that I pick up, because I've also been super into coaching, but I think these 9 minutes for some more sort of junior product leader or someone who's just now getting into coaching, super valuable. I want to highlight a few things you've done.
Please.
So the first thing, read the emotions, read the room. You notice that my body language is a bit down when I say it's okay, it's not good enough. So let's unpack that. Let's dig into it. Instead of a lot of product leaders, they would just, unfortunately, very sadly, they would just go, oh, okay, well, so what's the status on the project? It's like, so taking the time to really read the body language, and the whole dialogue was really sort of, I got your back type of dialogue.
Yeah.
And let's explore and unpack this together. You've also linked and sort of highlighted again the importance of having a clear framework to demonstrate what great looks like, because in situations like these, it facilitates the whole coaching conversation as well, and for Bob in this case to even understand the role of Afonso in this case. So great. I also like the pendulum of advice versus asking a question. So this is so important based on seniority and navigating that spectrum. So that is super important as well. Also digging into the personal relationships, like, okay, is this a competency issue or a challenge, or is this a trust challenge, or is this more a conflict kind of personality challenge? I also like that you highlighted the follow-up. So, let's go through it and have the conversation, and let's follow up next week. And also raising awareness that Afonso is junior, therefore, just be sort of gentle in a way, be mindful of that, and help sort of Afonso go through that journey. Loved it. So really kind of
super happy we did
it. Yeah, me too. It's great. I could go forever. But Petra, I can see we are running out of time. This was such an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time. I have so many things on my notes that I wanted to ask, so maybe for a second edition. But where can people find your work, Petra? Where are you most sort of visible these days? Where do you share your work, and what should people be aware?
Yeah, I'm very active on LinkedIn, and you can always, if you're a product leadership person, then you might want to get my newsletter. It's a quarterly newsletter, so it doesn't come often to your inbox. It's a lot of great reads that I stumble across. It's my recent writing, all these kind of things that are happening in the product industry, one could say. So that's maybe the blog. And you still can, if you're a product leadership person, I think Strong Product People is a great addition to your bookshelf. And you need to read it, obviously, not just put it on the shelf. So that's where you can find me. And then the other thing that I'm doing is organizing a product conference in Hamburg, where we have like 750 product people around. So it's still a mid-sized conference, but with a great lineup. So you can see me curate some of the great product voices out there for this conference. So that's definitely something, if you want to mingle with the fellow product people, that might be a great chance to do so.
It's indeed an amazing conference, and for all people, I know that there's a lot of Norwegians listening to this conversation, so for all Norwegians, take a flight to Hamburg. It's really worth it. Amazing lineup. Last year was great lineup as well, with Teresa Torres, John Cutler, and so many other voices. So really recommended. Is our tickets still available then, just to be clear?
Yes, there's still tickets available for the conference, not for workshops and
for
leadership. That's already sold out. Yeah.
Okay, well, congrats. Great to hear. All right, Petra, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Afonso.
All right, that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Make sure you subscribe to my newsletter so you don't miss out, and see you next time.